Hello, everybody. Welcome to another, I think it's going to be an incredible interview. I've got Lex Roman here on the call with me, and she's a super interesting designer, which I have a lot to think about. A lot of things I want to learn from her, and I think that she's doing things very smartly that you guys can learn from as well. So what's up, Lex? Thank you so much for coming on the show. Yeah, thank you, first of all.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Amazing. Okay, so listen, here's why I reached out to you and I wanted to talk to you. So I found out about you through Twitter, and then I went on your website. And then something immediately was super interesting to me was the fact that you are like framing yourself as a product and growth designer, which I think is very interesting, because that's also a lot of the work that I do. I work with startup companies as well, but I never saw anybody kind of position themselves as that type of designer. And when I was going through and reading everything in your website and your blog articles, I had like a big sense that you were very influenced by Running Lean, the book Running Lean, and the book maybe Hacking Growth. So I want to hear from you, like, how did you came up with that position? How did you got interested in growth product as a designer?
Yeah, so I went to UCLA Extension, which is the sort of the night program of UCLA, and I took a UX design class. This was like my first foray into UX from a professor named Jamie Levy, who has...
Wait, before that you had kind of graphic design experience or no design experience?
My design experience before that was primarily in set design for television. That was my career before UX design. So I had done graphic design for TV, which is very different for doing it for real. But UX design was brand new to me. I was coming out of architecture school, actually. I quit architecture school and enrolled in this class at UCLA Extension in UX from Jamie Levy, who has since written the UX strategy book that's on O'Reilly. Jamie's class was focused on lean startup methodology, like how UX designers can practice lean startup. And in the course of the class, we validated our ideas through UX techniques and lean startup techniques.
Okay.
So it was through her that I learned, that I sort of just like connected these things together. I would not have probably done that on my own. And I started reading all of those books, and she recommended Running Lean, which I love, like I still love and find to be one of the most useful resources.
It's amazing. I've actually implemented a lot of it with a lot of the projects that I'm working on.
Yeah, and it's like so thin. It's so easy. I used to like just hand it to founders and be like, definitely read this, and I don't know. It's like they probably
I send they have a great interview script for how to interview customers. I use that all the time. I also screenshot that to send to people that I work with.
Yeah.
When they think customer interview is so complex.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you took that course that got you into kind of thinking about lean kind of the lean methodology.
Yep.
Then what happened?
So at the time I was at a small digital agency in LA called Kluge, and I started practicing that. So I sort of built up their UX practice. They had a digital design practice, but it wasn't really strategic. So I started practicing conversion strategy, customer development, growth work basically, and helping mostly early stage companies try to validate their direction.
The UX course was also focused on growth, or that was just your first job experience?
No, I would say the UX course was focused on lean startup, which you could say is focused on growth, but I think people separate those a little bit.
I would say it's more like product market fit before growth, in a sense, even though they're closely related.
Yeah. So the UX class was really not focused on growth. After working at Kluge, I moved up to the Bay Area and worked for a lean startup consultancy, which is called Neo, which is no longer around. But I worked with major...
What does that mean? What is that lean startup consultancy? What does that mean?
Yeah.
I've never heard about that.
Yeah. It was a company that was founded by Ian McFarlane from Pivotal, Eric Ries, who wrote The Lean Startup, and Joy Ito of the Media Lab at MIT. And the idea was that you could sort of get Lean Startup as a service. Like, we would teach you how to do those practices and validate your early stage startup, validate direction as a big company, innovate in-house
Okay.
as an enterprise company, those kinds of things.
That's interesting. And it didn't work out as a business.
No, it turns out people don't want to hear their ideas suck, or
Oh,
they don't want to pay a
that's
lot of
true.
money and then not
Oh,
have a
that's
thing.
so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The idea was good, but the market wasn't good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I learned a ton from that experience.
Interesting. Okay. So what happened next?
I went to another consultancy in the Bay named Carbon 5, which had a much more reasonable approach to product development that incorporated some of those things but wasn't dogmatic about them. And we were much more successful with that there.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I went in-house,
So
and I've been in-house.
over there you were like a product designer, growth designer. What was your role?
I've always been either a UX or product designer. It wasn't until this current role that I've now called myself a growth designer.
Okay. And before that, you were working in Envision, as you told me, I think.
Yep, and I was a product designer at Envision.
Okay, so you were not like specifically focused on growth or anything like that.
No.
Okay, so you kind of led yourself like to become what was interesting for you, I guess, if I'm hearing correctly.
That's right. Although I would say that with the exception of my role at Envision, I've always practiced growth design. I just didn't need to call it that. After Envision, I learned that I really needed to call it that because not all product design roles were as flexible as the ones that I had held before, which would allow me to practice that work. Some product design roles are just create design.
Can you explain a little bit for maybe designers who are not like into the tech scene or they're not sure what growth designer means? So what does that mean?
Yeah.
For people who have no clue.
So I think of growth as a practice that can sit alongside any core skill set. So you can have growth marketers, growth engineers, growth PMs, growth designers. So it's the growth skill set with the design skill set.
What does that mean? Okay, what does that mean for people who have no clue, who didn't read like Hacking Growth, for example?
So it's the intent to grow the business and to do so exponentially. So that's the core. I mean, that's the core driver of anyone who has like a growth mindset is the desire to do that. And then there's, just like with design, there's several tools that you can use, like customer development would be one of them. Experimentation, A/B testing would be another one. Understanding product analytics, understanding things like marketing attribution, knowing the full range of experimentation techniques, knowing that A/B testing is just one of many techniques you can use to validate your ideas, and knowing the mechanics of some of those things. So like on the engineering side, for example, there's a lot that goes into A/B testing. It's not as easy as just integrating Optimizely. So developing the skills to know how to do that. Same thing on the design side. On the design side, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is not over designing stuff.
Okay.
So making sure that
What does that mean?
Yeah. Making sure that you have a vision, you know where you're going with a product, but not overbuilding it. Because if you spend too long building something that has high risk that you don't know if it'll work out, then you're just wasting time and resources.
Right. So I feel like from my experience, and I'm also super passionate about, just right now I actually came out from a client meeting where we were looking at the metrics and saw something weird and we were like discussing this, and I felt like a lot of designers are really afraid of being a part of that conversation, looking at graphs and data, and they're like what's it got to do with my job? So how do you got into that? Like what drew you into that?
It makes me so sad. Someone the other day said to me, because people say, oh, I'm not a numbers person. Like, I don't like numbers. But it's like not okay to be like, I don't like reading. Like, I just don't read. Yeah.
Oh, you'll be surprised. Nobody reads. That's really sad. True. Even sadder than the numbers problem.
But no one would say that. Like, I think at work, no one would be like, send over an article and be like, sorry, I don't read. Like, yeah, I do. Designers are the most afraid of numbers, I think, of all the disciplines.
It's true.
And my passion is helping them sort of break through, helping people who want to break through that discomfort. So I think a couple of reasons why it matters for design. One is that that if your company pays you to work there, they're expecting a return on that money. So if you get paid, if you're a volunteer, maybe it doesn't matter. But if you're getting paid, there's a reason you're getting paid. Find out what that reason
Oh
is.
man, so many designers do not understand like the business, like what are the mechanics that are producing their salaries, and that's a big problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you'd like to, get a raise, then it helps to know what you're doing to drive revenue for the business, because that's where that money comes from. So I think that's just a pretty basic one. Beyond that, I think it's critical to understand whether or not your design is successful. And data is the only way to really know that. Like, you're just not going to be able to interview everyone.
I feel like a lot of people are afraid of that, and let me share like a little experience, like a sad story, a sad real story, which is one of the startup company that I worked with had this kind of, they wanted to A/B test some newsletter that they were sending, and had everybody participate in the design, like not only the designers, like everybody else in the company. And one developer did like a horrible, like when I say horrible, I mean ugly email with like a button this size, and he won like the contest. His email converted most, and I think that's when I was like, shit, like that sometimes I don't want to know. Like, just because I'm a designer. And I think a lot of designers are afraid to understand that sometimes not the most pretty or what they would feel like is a good design is what really works.
That's true. And we need to be cautious of being like overly pretty and like I said, overly designing or overbuilding our things. At the same time, I don't think we have to we don't have to make everything ugly. The point of having designers involved in growth is to actually intentionally, authentically design your products. So you have that thoughtful design component and you bring the growth component. You say, well, we have the button at the top, but maybe it's not taking over the whole top. We still have our header, so that you're not just like putting out garbage. Like, you definitely don't want to just make everything, you don't want to just sort of spam everyone. And what was happening before when growth was primarily marketing focused was that marketers were just telling designers what to design, and they were really designing like how the thing was laid out, and designers are just picking the colors and fonts, and that's not design. So it's critical that we're involved in this stuff so that doesn't happen. And I think you can achieve both: a successful campaign and a design that authentically communicates your value.
Okay, so how do you, again, what's really interesting for me, as I said in the beginning, is that you've kind of made a conscious decision to position yourself, like build a brand for, Lex Ramen, and around that, I do like lean startup development, or like lean methodology plus growth hacking. If you want that, talk to me. I'm doing talks about this. I'm writing about this. I'm the person for you. Like, how did that, like, was that a conscious decision at one point? Was that just building up? How do you get to that point?
Yeah. When I left my job at Carbon 5, I was looking to focus entirely on growth. I loved doing that work. I was most successful at it. I found it the most rewarding, and it seemed to be the work that people found most valuable that I do, like what I do that provides the most value.
You have that thing in your website, which I love, which is like you show the dollar signs, like value is money or something like that, right? I love that.
Yeah, well, if you work on something for someone and you say, hey, we did the thing you asked for, here's all the money you made, like that's just.
But that is, you do this really nicely, where it's not like in your face, but it's like, the promise is, if you work with me, I'm going to make money for your company, which I think is an amazing promise, which so many designers are afraid to even contemplate saying. And I think that's very brave and very, like, you do that with a smile, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, some designers are afraid of that because it's risky. I like that risk. I need the high stakes, but there are a lot of other designers like me, which is part of why I started calling it that. So I heard the term growth design from a growth practitioner at Tradecraft, which is a school in San Francisco, historically for like growth and UX, but I think they do more than that now. And I was like, growth design, like who does that? And he was like, I don't know. That's just like a term that like, would be for a practitioner who does design. And so I wanted to find more people like that. So I just started calling it that to see like, does anyone else relate to this? And I started seeing more and more job postings for it. So
Okay.
I'm not alone by far.
Right, but and that kind of leads me to the second thing, which is you started the Facebook group, which I'm part of, right? Designing data or designing for growth.
Designing for
growth. Designing for growth.
Yep.
And you do kind of meetups in LA, or you host events or something like that. So what drove that kind of initiatives?
I wanted to know more people doing this work. It is really challenging work. It's not as straightforward as running lean would have you believe. So, or hacking growth, for example, like it's really not that straightforward. And there's a lot of nuance to it. And I just wanted to share opportunities and challenges and tools with other designers, specifically about the design part of growth. There are a lot of resources on growth marketing. There's less resources on growth product, and there's even less on growth design. So I wanted the community of practice, which is why I started those things.
That's cool. That's because I think that's kind of, it's funny that you say that you see a lot of job posting like this. I think maybe that's because you're in the West Coast, because I don't actually see a lot of those postings. I'm in Tel Aviv. There's a big tech scene here, but I haven't seen like companies literally looking for growth designers yet, but I kind of feel like this is a trend which you're kind of like at the cutting edge, and like soon where everybody's looking for a growth designer and they're going to Google that or something, that you're already going to have that position, which I think is really smart. Was that like a deliberate thing, or it's just like, no, I'm passionate about that, so?
I'm still debating the term, because growth designer roles right now tend to be more marketing. And I really want to make a distinction between growth marketing and growth product, because I do think they're pretty different.
Let me know. Explain that to me, because I'm not even sure what the difference is.
Well, so marketing is still marketing. Like you still need to, drive up interest in your product or service. And there's a whole tool set there around like paid versus unpaid content marketing. Like there's a ton to understand about marketing.
So that's growth, but only focusing on the top of the funnel.
Well, that's just marketing. Like there's a whole marketing, skill set. And then growth would be doing that with the mindset of growing the business. So you're not just maintaining a blog and an Instagram account, but you're doing so in a focused, measured way, with an intent to grow the business.
When you're working in-house right now. So are you part of the growth team or part of the design team? Do you have something like, is that separate or?
So I'm part of product design, and we sit under tech with engineering and product.
Okay, so you don't have kind of a dedicated growth team or something like that?
No.
Which is kind of like, because in the book, I think, in the book Hacking Growth, he kind of suggests to have a special team dedicated for growth, which I know some companies have.
Some companies do. I think increasingly we're seeing that spread out. And growth, historically, the growth team has been primarily marketing driven. I mean, with the exception of like some of those famous examples in the book, like Uber or Facebook, but at many companies, growth has been primarily marketing. So what's happening now, I think, is that more product people are getting into growth, and you're seeing product teams that are focused on acquisition, revenue, retention, growth metrics. So and Andrew Chen actually gave a talk pretty recently about how to set up your growth team, and there are many ways to do it. So yeah, I guess my question about like having a growth team is kind of like, well, what is everyone else doing if not growing the business? So like
I also think about that. Yeah.
So I think it could be more effective to, I don't know. I wrote about it in a post, like the different ways that I think it could go. Everything from having internal growth consultants to having a dedicated team to making every team a growth team or making many teams growth teams. I don't know if it's been solved.
Let's imagine I'm a designer starting out, and that sounds cool, like being a growth designer, like looking at A/B testing and finding experiments to grow the business and make them more money and get a raise and all that stuff. So what would I do to become a growth designer? Like, what do I need to focus on? Okay, I'll get over my fear from numbers. Now what?
So I would definitely just start reading growth resources. And Jess Eddy put out a blog post that is specifically a list of resources for growth designers.
Okay,
it's
that's
on
awesome.
the
So
UX.
send me the link, and we'll put this in the description.
It's in the UX Collective. Okay, I will. Yeah, so I would start reading growth resources, and I think as designers, people will start connecting their design practice to growth. It's pretty clear how to do that, but I think we also need to start building up more resources around how to do specifically the design parts, like how do you deal with your design system when you're running experiments, or what are all the different ways you could validate a design that are not as quantitative as A/B testing, and how do you not overbuild?
Okay, that's cool. Last thing I want to ask you, which I found interesting, is that you're doing a lot of speaking gigs I saw around data and stuff like that. How, I find that interesting, as I'd love to speak at events as well, but nobody calls me. So what was your process to get speaking gigs and talk at interesting places?
You just submit. Just send in your stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Send
people your
for
stuff.
Somebody to call me.
I don't think.
Yeah, so you just reach out to people.
Yeah,
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, most conferences have calls for submissions, so I just submit to all of them. Yeah.
Silly me. I was waiting for somebody to. Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe eventually they'll call. I don't think anyone's. I'm trying to think if I've ever. I mean, that maybe a couple people have asked me to speak at local events, but all the conference stuff I've submitted for.
Amazing. I think I'll start doing that myself as well.
Do it, yes.
All right, Lex, thank you so much for spending your morning before. I don't know if you got time for coffee today.
Yeah, maybe a little.
Spending with me a little bit of your time and sharing some insights and knowledge. I really, really appreciate that. So thank you. Good luck in your new role. And yeah.
Thank you, Ren. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
All right. Talk soon.